Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Byron Jabara, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Byron Jabara, and it's Thursday. That means it's time for a brand new guest. We're going to discuss their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today is a lieutenant in the fire department, and because that doesn't provide enough adventure, last year he actually reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. He's also a martial artist and one of the hosts of the BJJ Brick podcast. Please welcome to the show, Byron Jabara. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is I've been looking forward to this opportunity ever since you got a hold of me, and I really appreciate the show. I think this the listeners out there, the show I think is a gift to the martial arts community.
Thank you.
It's a lot of hard work you do, and it's few people could do something like this, and I'm glad you're doing it.
No,
I'm honored to be here.
Well, and I'm honored to have you on. So, well, what we do with a lot of my guests, we go back to the beginning. I want to know, what was that first spark, that first interest? What led to your first interest in martial arts?
Yeah, I think all like little kids are interested in fighting. I had a little brother, and and learned a little bit about dealing with my brother. But it was back in 2002 I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think back in those days and earlier in those days, everyone says the same answer. It was the UFC. It was Royce Gracie,
right? And
that was me. I mean, so like a lot of the current black belts, it's pretty much the same answer. it's I used to watch the early UFCs, and Royce Gracie inspired me to train. And back then it's quite a bit different as far as training goes. I started with a purple belt and a bunch of other white belts.
Okay.
And it was it's different than it is today, but it was. That's how I started, and it's definitely grown a lot since then.
So when you first started thinking about doing that, now, was there multiple schools you checked out? Did you only have one choice? What kind of led to you to land where you landed and start training there?
Yeah, I live in Wichita, Kansas, which is about 300,000 people, maybe closer to 4. So not like a big city, but not a little town either. And back then there was one school.
Okay.
and now there's probably 6 or 7, and they're all really pretty good.
Okay. Wow.
There's a lot of good instruction, but back then it just hadn't really developed yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so once you started, what drew you to it? What made you want to stay in it?
I think it was very frustrating. I was a little bit smaller than most of the guys in there, and I would come in and I'd learn some moves, and none of them would work. Like I learned a choke or an arm lock or something, mm-hmm. and then I would it's time to spar, and I couldn't get anything to work, and we had one guy who was almost 100 pounds bigger than me. I was like 160, he's probably close to 250 or whatever.
Wow. And
he would just toy with me, and it was frustrating. And then we had a guy come in from out of town who was my size, and he just took that big guy apart. It was like, whoa, this works if I keep at it. And it was just like a kind of mind, it opened up my mind a little bit about the techniques. They aren't necessarily easy, but with the right practice and training, you could pull these things off. And I think that was a big day for me to watch somebody else deal with one of my training partners. And then I could never, I couldn't do that, not
right.
that I could never do it, but I couldn't at that time approach that level of proficiency. And that was like, well, I need to stick with it if I want to get any better at this.
It's funny you mentioned toying with you. That made me think of a story back in the early 90s. I mentioned my traditional Taekwondo instructor. We started adding in ground game probably around 93, 94, right when the UFC started. And we were working on some grappling techniques one time in class, and he had a background in it, which none of us did. And he's giving us tips as we're grappling with him. And he told me to grab his toes and bend on his toes, So I grabbed his toes, and then he started flexing his toes. I'm holding as hard as I can, and my hand's just moving forward as he flexes his toes with a big smile on his face. I'm like, that's not even fair, sir. Like, no one's toes should be that strong. I'm sorry.
That's funny.
It was good.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
just
really good.
yeah, it's kind of like okay, somebody else has gotten good at something.
Pretty much. So what was it about that first instructor that you liked? I know you mentioned it wasn't a black belt when you first started, but what was it about that instructor that kind of stood out, some of those lessons you learned and stuff?
It was, back then it was almost more of we fought a lot more as far as with each other. Like I say this a lot to people. Like in jiu-jitsu, we have like our spar, we call it rolling, and I tell them rolling is not fighting. We're trying to get better at jiu-jitsu when you're rolling. It's
right.
Okay to let somebody get mount and then work on your escapes or do whatever. And back then we were basically trying to beat each other. Like we were all on the same quote team or whatever. But like when I would roll with if me and you got matched up, I'm going to try to choke you as many times as I could in 5 minutes. And that's changed. But he did provide safety. We would fight super hard, and we would always fight to win, which I think is a way to kind of slow down your progress. But he would make sure we're safe, and if he saw that we were being unsafe, he would step in and pick us apart a little bit. And he had some people, unlike myself, have like a catalog of techniques in their head that you reference a position or a technique, and then he'll branch off 5 other things. Me, I have a small collection of techniques I'm okay with. And both are okay.
Right.
But he is still impressive as far as the vast amount of knowledge, especially about ground fighting, that sort of thing, that he has accumulated over the years.
Yeah, and if those small collection of techniques work, that's all that matters. I mean, you look at someone like a Ronda Rousey. I mean, she literally won how many matches with one single technique for how many years?
Yeah. So. Yeah, and you're right about that.
Yeah, and that I know.
And everybody knew it was coming too. I mean,
and you still couldn't do anything about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, just I'm going to armbar you. Nothing you can do about it. I mean,
yeah.
Pretty much. So now, before you got into BJJ, now were you an athlete? Was competition something that you had done when you were younger, or was that kind of a new aspect?
I wrestled 1 year.
Okay.
And I did a few other sports, but I wasn't any good at them. I'm not real athletic.
Okay. Because with BJJ,
I do enjoy
the whole way you advance is by competition, isn't it?
Competition is probably the wrong word.
Okay.
Because you don't have to compete, but we do a lot of rolling, like I was saying,
right.
or sparring but we do a lot of that, and I don't know if you'd even have to do that to advance. Okay. But if you don't enjoy that, it's hard to enjoy jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So if you got your purple belt, and which is kind of a mid-level, I don't know how other belt systems work,
right,
but and you go in there and you can't keep up with most of the blue belts, which are a step below, and some of the white belts are giving you a super hard time. That's a pretty tough belt to have on your waist. Nobody wants a belt that's higher than they need. So although not everybody competes, I would say fewer than 10% of the people that actually do jiu-jitsu go out and compete. We all kind of get to hang with your ranks as far as what belts you have.
Okay. So at any time since the UFC was kind of what kind of got you interested, did you ever throw your hat in there and try MMA at all?
No, I'm not an MMA guy. I'm already ugly enough, and I don't need to be getting punched in the nose. And to be honest, I'm not that tough.
Okay.
I like the aspect of jiu-jitsu as far as like outsmarting people, and I don't mind dealing with like pressure and people's aggression and that sort of thing. But I like to get better at jiu-jitsu, and it's kept me for over 20 years basically injury free, and I'm just not I guess back in the day, in my earlier days, we would have people come in and some other martial artists come in, and it would be kind of a little bit more of a scrap, or even doing some tournaments in my younger days.
Right.
But anymore, I need my body in order to do my job, and and I could train safely as hard as I would like. So I like to think of myself as not particularly a tough martial artist. I'd rather be a smarter one, if that makes sense.
That perfect sense. So do you remember your very first tournament? Kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I drove down with a couple of buddies or teammates, and I'm in Kansas, and it was in Oklahoma, which is one state to the south. And I've been training for maybe a year and a half or so, and it was either the beginners division or the advanced division, and that was it. I was like, man, I thought it was like the intermediate division. So and the guy looked at me and said, "Did you come here to win a match or to get a good match?" And I said, "I want a good match." So I signed up for the advanced division.
Wow.
And and I don't, not to get super technical, but I shot in for a takedown. I got a takedown, but a common thing that happens when you do a crappy takedown like I did is you get your head stuck in a guillotine.
Ooh.
And they didn't award me points for the takedown because he countered with an attack. And so I popped my head out eventually and started working. And I was like, oh, I don't even have any points for my takedown. And before I know it was over, but it wasn't that exciting. I think everybody remembers the first match because it's kind of it's an interesting process. Like I remember you remember your first day going into a class or your first match. I think it's common for people. I mean, in the tournament, half the people lose their first match.
Right.
Half of them. Right? If there's 10 people, 5 will lose right away. And you got to think a lot of people have had a tournament before. And so like if it's your first tournament, the odds of losing your first match are really pretty good. Even you train hard, you don't want to go that route, but the ability to bounce back and to keep training and to continue to enjoy the process of learning the art, I think are important.
So a typical tournament, how many matches would you have in a day?
So jiu-jitsu is interesting. I think I had the most 8 to 10 was probably the most I had in a day.
Wow.
And that would be 2 different brackets. In jiu-jitsu and in no-gi jiu-jitsu, submission wrestling, they often will do a no weight class division. And I call absolute. And those are challenging. You kind of enter in, especially a guy. I'm getting bigger as I get older, but back in my younger competing days, you don't expect to win against somebody who's got 50 pounds on you, but they start you off with a person about the similar size, and you work your way up or work your way down, and it's just good experience. So yeah.
Kind of just walk us through for, maybe some of my listeners who've never, I've never actually gone through a full BJJ class. Like I said, I've done seminars and stuff, but just kind of walk us through a typical class. What can someone expect if they're going to go and try a BJJ school for the first time? What would they expect in a typical class?
Typical class. So it's changed a lot. Like I was saying, back when I started, it was, we were in there fighting hard and just, I wasn't trying to get better. I was trying to win.
Right.
Anymore, I travel a decent amount and I like to train when I travel, and schools have gotten a lot better. I would expect, first thing, if you show up a little early, you're going to see people joking around, having fun, and people are close to each other and they're longtime friends. And it's kind of hard to just slide into that environment, but you want to see that people get along well. And typically there'll be a warm-up portion, maybe some light jogging or some stretching, something like that. But then kind of the middle of the class, they do some technique. I think 2 or 3 moves is pretty common. And then they'll spar afterwards. A lot of times they'll set a timer. And if you're new, the coach may pair you up with a more experienced person. It's much safer for a new person to do some jiu-jitsu with an experienced person versus somebody who's, because just put yourself in the shoes of a white belt. I guess I don't really wear shoes, but like me, none of my techniques work. And so suddenly, Brian comes in and he looks tough and he's a martial artist and I got to get one of my moves to work on Brian. I'm going to do anything I can, and that's not a safe way to train. So typically you'll get paired up with somebody who's got a little more experience, who can control themselves and control you to a degree. And you kind of get it too. My thing is I want us both to do jiu-jitsu because jiu-jitsu has a way of control to where an experienced person can enable the less experienced person to not do any jiu-jitsu. They just do suffering. And that's not productive for either person. So a lot of times, if it's your first time, they won't even let you roll it. So you just watch. And hopefully, if you do watch, you kind of get the vibe that people are talking during the rolling sessions. They're not, actively trying. It's not a fight and that sort of thing. If they do let you roll, they'll probably let you roll with more advanced people. And if another big thing I tell people that are fairly new is ask questions. Especially if you're getting your butt kicked. If it's 2 or 3 minutes in and you're getting tapped out several times and you can hardly breathe, you need to start asking questions. That'll slow the person down and that'll put them into teaching. But people love to teach. Nice. It'll be more enjoyable for you too.
So now, do you guys, the school you train at, do you guys ever do like cross training with other styles? Do you bring in instructors from other styles and do stuff like that, or is it pretty much solely focused on BJJ?
I think I would say the core of the business is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we do have. We're really fortunate to have a lot of people who kind of have migrated in. We just got a guy who moved into town, I guess. I don't know where from, but he's a black belt in judo. And it's like he's starting his own. He's going to teach judos, I think, on Monday evenings or something like that. Now, that's really neat. Nice. And we've got several other kickboxing coaches and that sort of thing as well. But what keeps the doors open is the jiu-jitsu side of the gym.
Okay. Yeah, I know my traditional Taekwondo instructor, he's been running a open martial arts tournament for over 20 years. And about 15 years ago, he talked to the local BJJ instructor, and we actually added a grappling division that's been going on for the last 15 years. So you have on one half of the gym, we have basically the, traditional Taekwondo and sparring and forms and breaking and weapons. And the other half of the gym, they bring out the wrestling mats and they do a jiu-jitsu competition, which is kind of cool.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's been successful. There's been times where there's been 100 plus people competing. So
it's good. It's a good experience to get. That's one thing. Like, especially if you're just kind of starting out and you want to try your hand at competing, it's good experience to do that. Like something that people don't understand. Like in jiu-jitsu, we always talk about wrestlers, because they're good at fighting on the ground. But if you wrestled all through high school, you've had hundreds of matches.
Right. You
stood across the mat from somebody who was trying to do something to you, with the referee next to you, shook hands and competed hundreds of times. And in jiu-jitsu, like I said, at the most, maybe 10 a day, and that was a good day. I mean, the first time I did a tournament, I drove 2.5 hours for 5 minutes.
Wow.
Like, it doesn't compete with wrestling and what they are able to do. And like the kids tournaments at any martial art, if they are able to get a good amount of matches in, I think that really helps like calm the nerves and helps them perform under stress.
Yeah. And that's changed too. Cause I know the tournaments I used to go to in the 90s, you'd see people getting 5, 6, 7 matches, for stand-up martial arts versus now there's so many more people in it. 3 might be considered a good one. So it kind of depends too on just how many people show up, and they have to fit everybody. So you might not get as many as you thought you were going to.
Yeah. And I mean, I thought, like you want to win, you want to perform well, but this may not be your fight. Like, would you trade like all of your victories, competition for one victory on the street? Like where it actually mattered, to where life was on the line. Like that's your fight. That's what you were training for. And so any amount of training up into that, including tournaments that were wins or losses, we're getting ready for that day that, mistakes were made or whatever happened. And it came down to making a life and death actions. And okay, that's the reason why you were training. And it was important.
Yep.
The tournament, it's a good experience.
That's a great point.
None of us are making like a living on winning tournaments as far as as far as me goes, I guess.
That is true. That is very true. So in all your years, is teaching ever something that you've started doing? Has that become part of what you're doing?
Let's see. I teach in a limited fashion, as far as I mentioned I don't do a ton of techniques. I have a handful of techniques I do well. When the gym owner wants the techniques I do well, he says, "Hey, show this." I do a couple of guard passes that are fairly technical that work pretty much on any type of guard. And so I'll show those. But he could ask me to show, I don't like a type of like a daily hip guard. I have no business teaching that. Okay. I don't have that broad spectrum of techniques. So I don't teach. I guess I don't teach for money. I don't. I've taught seminars, but I don't have here locally. I'm part of a team, and when I could help the team by teaching something I'm good at, I'm more than happy to do that. And when I'm a student, I'm always a student. But when I'm able to just sit back and absorb, I do that too.
Okay. So then within seminars and stuff, how do you think your teaching styles changed over the years, since maybe the first time you ever taught maybe a white belt something to your most recent seminar? How do you think that's changed?
Let's see. That's a good question. You have to adapt you have to teach to the student, I think is a big one. It's when you're first starting to teach something, you kind of want to show them that you're good at it. You want to show something a little bit more fancy or flashy. But if the student can't pick that up, you're just showing them that you're good at something, versus teaching down to the level that they are and really them walking out of there with something that they could use. I ask a lot of people like, "Hey, what are you working on today?" If me and you are gonna spar and you've been training for a while, and I say, "What are you working on?" You might tell me triangle choke, or you might say everything, But if you're working on triangle chokes, I guarantee you're going to get several triangle choke attempts on me in the roll, and then we're going to talk about that right, towards the end of the round a little bit to clean those up if you can.
Okay.
So I think you got to. It's hard. The jiu-jitsu has a problem with a lot of times we just have one class, and we have beginners and advanced people trying to learn similar things. And sometimes that's tough. If somebody could find a gym that has a beginner's class, that's a lot easier to pick those fundamental techniques up.
Definitely.
Not learning some, advanced leg entanglement inversion that I can't understand, but that really flexible young people play your first day in jiu-jitsu. That's not ideal. You got to teach to the student, I think.
So now in doing a seminar, is that a little more difficult when you're teaching a group of, say, 20 people versus just one-on-one? Is that a little more difficult to teach to the student?
So I like to do a seminar that's themed.
Okay.
Versus I've been to both, and both are fine. Some people come in, they'll show a 2-hour seminar, they'll show 20 techniques that don't have any. They're like, I'm going to show you this armbar variation, and I'm going to show you this takedown, and let's do this. I'll teach a back attack seminar or a leg drag seminar, and that's it. And so that way I can start with, like, my back attack seminar is how we're going to take the back. And we're going to give you 2 ways. We're going to drill it for a while and get it down. And then once we get the back, we're going to work to the progression, to the choke, and all the while keeping stability. And so I think it's good for any student, but like the newer ones, they kind of need that broad spectrum first to understand what's going on.
Right.
Like if you're in your first month of jiu-jitsu, taking the seminar is probably a bit overwhelming no matter what you're doing.
Definitely.
But I do like, and I often will pass it like a handout as far as here's what we did, here's the outline of the techniques, because it's hard to remember stuff. But I do enjoy teaching them. I think that to see the students pick them up, it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I know I told you about that one open martial arts seminar we did like 10 years ago, and the BJJ person, I think it was either an hour and 15 or 90 minutes. I can't remember, but we worked on one technique for the whole time. And it was so good. It was so, by the end of it, we all had it down pretty decently. It was a pretty good, I still have I should find the video and send it to you. We still have it on video. But do you
remember what the technique was?
That was over 10 years ago. I know it involved.
Was it like a submission or?
It ended with an arm bar, but it was, okay. I'm trying to remember it. I haven't watched that video in a while, but I know it was, you started kind of behind the person, and it was like faking which way you were going to go, and then going the opposite direction, and then grabbing the arm and falling into an arm bar, something to that effect. But I'll find the video. I know I still have it on my computer somewhere because I recorded the whole weekend. So it was cool. Cool. Yeah, it was cool to watch. I mean, like I said, that was easily 10 years ago. I mean, I can't remember exactly when, but it was, and everyone enjoyed it. I think that was, out of all the ones we had, that was probably that one, and I think the Hapkido one were the two that had the most attendance. So out of all the ones we had, so that one had, I think there was probably 20 to 30 people in it. That one. So
wow, that's good.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun weekend. So
well, having fun is important. I mean,
exactly.
I like, especially like the new people. If you're nervous or you're scared, like, you're not learning. You have to be at a comfortable place as far as being able to learn something in order to actually have it stick.
Yeah,
this stuff is hard, and if I'm yelling at you or whatever, like, it's hard to learn in that environment. But if I'm making like positive corrections or encouragements, that's a learning environment. And I think that's one thing that a lot of gyms have kind of moved towards, as far as creating an environment that is really conducive to learning.
Yeah, it's kind of, if you talk to a lot of the old school guys from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, I mean, it's completely different. I mean, most people nowadays couldn't handle it. I mean, even just some of the stuff I heard about in the 80s even. I mean, even looking back to when I first started, my current instructor in 94, I mean, if he taught classes like he did then he wouldn't have any students right now.
Yeah.
It's changed, and it's just because society's changed, unfortunately. I still miss some of that hardcore stuff, but I realize too, like I said, if I'd be the only one there.
Yeah, I think, but there's room for like competition classes,
exactly,
and classes that like open that as a thing at Jiu-Jitsu. It's like, come in and we're going to be fighting all the entire time.
Nice,
and they're pretty hard roles and that sort of thing. But that's kind of, you need to enjoy the process before that becomes a thing that you're gonna get there, and even enjoy the tough roles that don't go real well for you.
Yeah, no, and that's one thing we used to do too. And back in the 90s, he doesn't do it anymore, obviously, because of schedules. But we used to have an open gym on Saturdays at our Taekwondo school, and it was noon to 4 every Saturday, and it was, anyone was welcome, not just our students, people from other styles, anyone that wanted to come in, learn something, practice something, share knowledge, train stuff. And it was so cool.
I love that. Yeah.
I wish it was still
That's good for the whole city.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know the exact number now, but when I initially had this idea for this podcast as a radio show years ago, I tried pitching it to a few different radio stations I worked at about a weekly martial arts talk show, and none of them thought it would work. But at one point, I think it was 2007 or 2008, I went and did all the research, and I think at the time, within about a 30-mile radius of where I am, there was 31 or 32 different martial arts schools. So, I mean, it's a lot of them out there. I mean, And I don't know, right? I honestly don't know if it's more or less right now. I haven't checked that in a while. I know we've had some new ones that have popped up. We've had some that have closed and stuff, but we have numerous styles, and we have, anything from, BJJ to judo to kung fu. We have boxing. We have, we have fencing. We have Japanese aido. It's just all kinds of different styles and stuff. And I'd love to start doing that big open thing again and getting it all together. I just don't know if I can pull it off again, but I might try.
And it's nice to get the connections as far as you learn stuff and things like that too, but you learn that the gym 3 or 4 miles away, they're not jerks.
Yeah.
Just like you, they like martial arts, it's and you might learn some moves or whatever, but you recognize that person, and you'll see them in the store, and you'll say hi, like you're making more friends. I really like it when communities kind of work together, and everybody has a business to run, and
right,
and that sort of thing, but
we're
all on the same team.
Yeah, ultimately. And there's some that they treat it as competition. Obviously, to a point, it is competition. But yeah, I've had people come in to our school and visit and ask questions, and they're like, this might not be the school for you, but you should go check out this one. And I've actually sent people away just because what they said they were looking for didn't fit what we were doing.
Sure.
So, and it's like they've appreciated that. And I've had other instructors like, did you send me a student? I'm like, yeah, I did.
Yeah. And they respect you for that too.
Exactly. So I'm curious, kind of tell the story. How did the podcast start? Where did the idea come from, and kind of what, talk a little bit through that journey of the podcast for you guys.
Yeah, it started, man, I thought I looked it up earlier. I didn't write it down. I've got over 500 episodes.
Yeah. Wow.
But it started with me and a buddy who we would do Friday night training, and it was like super small. It would be like 3 or 4 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would end up after class, like, hey, good night, everybody. We'd just walk out and we would just chat in the parking lot about jiu-jitsu for like 45 minutes. And then like, what are we doing? Let's gotta go home. And after like a few of those, like, let's record this and put it up on online. And like, I'm glad you have a podcast, not a radio show, because I wouldn't be able to listen to your radio show.
Exactly.
Your podcast has global reach now.
Yep.
And it gets archived. And you mean, I think about it, but people who you've interviewed, like some of those people are going to want to research them in the future. And you have like documented information about them. It's kind of nice. Like you always think of like back in the day in the 70s or 60s or whatever, like the martial arts. Well, in 40 years, this is we back in the day. And I don't think people are going to be researching me, but you've interviewed some pretty impressive people who have some really impressive stories to share. And you're part of that story now. And I don't know what question you asked me, but I think I changed the topic.
Just kind of how it started and a little bit how the journey has been and stuff.
Yeah, I started it's called the BJJ Brick podcast, and it's just kind of a way to talk about jiu-jitsu. And then I started interviewing people kind of like this. And then it was kind of fun to interview people who I thought were interesting in the community and to share that. And kind of like you're finding out, people will respond to you. You have a successful show, and you send somebody a message and they'll ding, they surprise you. And we're doing this.
Yep.
And now it's kind of like I kind of got away from that. My schedule changed, and it's a little different now, but I just do like a little 5-minute show almost every day, 5 days a week.
Wow. And
just talk about, like, I have kind of a theme for the week usually, and I just kind of discuss a topic in little short 5-minute episodes. So it's going with the punches, I guess. But
yeah,
it's like this. It's a labor of love for the community. I do enjoy it, but it's a decent amount of work. But
yeah, there's definitely work involved. But
yeah,
like you said,
I
we do it because we enjoy it, and I'll, with guests, I've had many where I get no response. I've only had a couple people flat out say no, and I've had 2 people want to charge me to be on the show. So
I had that too.
And I'm like, I'm not.
I had that. I was like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I've had people much bigger than you that were glad to do it. I'm not going to pay you.
Yeah.
One guy actually wanted $150 for every half hour. Yeah, no. Like even if I had a big paying sponsor, I don't know if I'd pay a guest. It's just,
I think the reason that they're wanting to do it, like if they get a payout, it should be in providing good quality information,
mm-hmm.
and getting their name out a little bit for their sport or the martial art or what they represent. That's the payout. It shouldn't. Yeah. I had a guy, I interviewed him. It went pretty well. And then later on he was in the Olympics, and I messaged him back, and he's like, yeah, it's gonna. My time is super valuable right now. It's gonna cost a lot of money. Like, I don't need that time.
Nice.
No big deal, man.
That's cool. I did have one person say no. I actually contacted them before I launched the show, because I told you I had like 22 episodes done ahead of time, And he said no. And then after the show had been on about 6 months, I sent him another message with a link. And he's like, I don't really have time, blah, 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 blah. And then about 5 minutes later, he must have clicked the link. He emails back. He goes, you had an impressive guest list. How does next week work? So
that's funny.
Like, cool. Definitely. And it was a lot of fun talking to him. So yeah, it's fun. And like I said, my goal is to have as many people with different backgrounds, different styles on here as I can, and just letting them tell their story and talking about martial arts and fun stuff. So
yeah, you do a good job. I couldn't, like, you have that broad amount of knowledge of other arts. Like I don't have that. It's nice. It's nice that somebody like you is doing this.
I appreciate that. Like you just mentioned, you don't have the broad knowledge. You've pretty much focused on BJJ your whole martial arts career. What advice would you give someone who is looking to get involved in martial arts? They've never done it before, and just maybe some tips. What should they look for in a school? What should they look for in an instructor?
I think people are nervous. I mean, you think about, so if you're going to start a new job, you're going to have a little bit of nerves and a little butterfly. But no one at the new job is going to punch you or choke you. Like, so
hopefully,
like, yeah. Hopefully, well, actually, you get a good lawsuit out of the deal.
There you go.
But like, so they're going to be nervous. And I always tell people with jiu-jitsu that are going in, like, first off, if a friend of mine wants to go, I do my best to be there when they're there the first day. Yeah. I want them to have a positive experience. But if they're training at a different gym, or they're, a listener that's asking about it, I think your main focus for your first day, yes, go in there and watch a class and see what it's like and see if it looks like it'll be something you'll enjoy or what you're looking for. But your first day of actually being on the mat, people are trying to figure out what technique to learn and what to do and how to fight. Or I think the main goal should be to make a friend or two, because the second day can be just as hard as the first day.
Yes.
And so if you go in there and I meet Brian and he seemed cool and he was helpful and he didn't he was better at this than me because I'm new at it. Why would I be good at something I'm totally new at? But he was helpful and he made me feel like I was I could be good at this, so go in there and be friendly and try to make a friend or two, remember some names. And I always tell people, because they're nervous, it's going to be like a fight club and they're going to go home with a broken nose and their arms are going to be snapped. We're like, this is a business. Like, they have to earn their business. If you go in there and they don't treat you well, they don't treat you like you think you need to be like a customer, look at the next gym. There's a lot of martial arts gyms, and they need to earn, in my opinion, they need to earn their business. They need to treat their students well. And I'm not saying that they don't need to have, I'm not trying to flip the script on treating. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. Yes. No, that's a good answer.
I think that makes the nervousness a little bit less, as far as what they're having to. You're not gonna be good at it. No matter what. If I were to walk into a boxing gym, I would be a horrible. I wouldn't go in there with the idea that, I'm going to try to be decent. No, I'm going to be horrible at boxing. I'm going to be horrible at any kicking. I think I can kick above the weights. I'd probably fall down. Why would I be good at that? So somebody who wants to try jiu-jitsu, people ask me that are fellow firefighters ask me, hey, I think I'd be good at it? No, not the first day. Of course not. Why would you be good at playing? You're up north. Why would I be good at playing hockey if I've never done it before? It's new. You're gonna have to be not good at it for a little while. Nobody expects you to be good at it. Even the big tough guys. I'm sure you've sparred with guys who are very muscular and like that. Are they good at it? No, because they don't know it yet. They just have a fast or strong, like a big, strong truck or a fast vehicle that is the tools, but without having any knowledge how to use it, you're not going to be good at it until you learn that.
Exactly.
And nobody expects you to be amazing on your first day. Go in there as a student.
If the instructor expects you to be amazing your first day, it's probably not the school for you. So
yeah, that's true.
So I know we touched on this next question a little bit, but kind of what are your thoughts then on MMA and the UFC, and are you a fan? Kind of like the evolution of MMA from 93 till now. What are your thoughts on it?
Man, I'm not really a sports fan of anything as far as I don't watch a lot of sports. So I used to be able to follow MMA when they would when the UFC or Pride would have an event every 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
Because that's easy to follow for a guy like me that doesn't keep up with it. I would much rather just go train than to watch somebody else do MMA.
Right. Even
live. I get so much joy out of getting on the mat and getting good, hard technical rolls in. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 years, and I was rolling with that purple belt the other day, and he's a very good wrestler, and I put him on his back, and I knew he just wanted to stand up. I knew he wanted to pop up, and I have a couple of techniques I do to keep them from just standing up. And I was my goal for now as a black belt is to keep this guy on his back. And then he faked a triangle choke on me, and I defended the triangle choke, and he stood right up.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I've never had that happen. It wasn't even hard. It wasn't super, but it was just like 20 years. And in 10 seconds, this kid stood right back up. Like, that was amazing. It was just fun. I enjoy like the riddle of jujitsu, and I got tricked. And like, well, that didn't work at all. I got to try to put him on his back again. But it's just fun. I'd rather. So I guess your question about the modern UFC or whatever, like, it's entertainment. Those guys are freak athletes. That's not me. I've got on the mat with people who, we have several professional athletes at my gym. I've been on the mat with several, like guys from the UFC or whatever. Those guys, this is their job. I have a job. You have a job. Yep. It's not fighting people, and they're also good at it as far as being like athletically gifted.
Right.
I always like learning. I like to learn martial arts from people who are good at teaching it, not from people who are necessarily good at doing it. Because, like for jiu-jitsu, the people who are at the top of the food chain, it's easy for them. They pick it up easier. They do it better. You show me a technique once, and I now have exposure to it. And you show it to me 3 or 4 times after that, I can maybe show somebody else, or maybe kind of do it in a slow manner. It takes me a while to learn something. You show one of these freak athletes that one time, and they'll go do it to somebody. Like, unbelievable. Like, it's interesting watching the change in the UFC, but they do have to put butts in the seat, and they do have to make it. And I know jiu-jitsu, I'd much rather watch a jiu-jitsu tournament, but it is hard to watch it. You don't know what's going on. It's really confusing, and it doesn't sell it's not as violent looking. Judo is a prettier sport or martial art to watch than jiu-jitsu, as far as like just the performance of the athletes. But I like jiu-jitsu, but I'd rather do jiu-jitsu than watch it.
True. Yeah, and I'm the same way. I used to watch the UFC all the time. I used to never miss one, and now it's like they're weekly events. And I probably haven't sat and watched a full one in at least 5 years. So
really, yeah.
I mean, and I used to judge them too.
Overwhelming.
I used to go to live ones all the time. I was judging at least 1 or 2 events a month, and it's just, since I stopped judging, like I said, it's 5-6 years. The last time I probably watched a full UFC event. So
when they judge them, I always thought it'd be better if they would let them know who was up or down, and that way to give a little. I don't think they do that, but
like after each round,
to give a little bit of give a little pressure to the guy who's losing, because nothing is worse than thinking you're winning and then you're actually down. You need to pick it up. You're in desperation mode. That's not a bad idea. I don't think they do that.
No, I mean, it's not a bad, because everything else, any other martial arts event, most of them, they have the scoreboard there. You can see it, which, part of me is a fan of that. Part of me's not. Cause like, I've watched many sparring matches where someone's up 20-7 and they literally spend the whole time just trying to protect their lead instead of trying to actually score more points. And a lot of times it backfires. Yeah. So I see both ways, definitely. So definitely. It's cool. So here's one for you. Who would you put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be 4, but maybe 2, maybe 3. If you have 4, that's fine. But
so I think the tallest jiu-jitsu person I could think of would be Hodger Gracie. He's like, Mount Rushmore's tall, right? So I'll talk about Hodger for a minute. Like,
no, just people you just admire, you look up to in martial arts.
I think he's on the and I'm joking, but he's on he's an amazing person as far as everybody knows Hoyes. I think you have to be a little bit more interested to know Hodger, but Hodger did the same thing to everybody. Hodger would get to mount, which is not easy to do, and then he would choke you. Okay. Everybody for years. It's like Ronda Rousey times 10 as far as like the length of time he accomplished this.
Wow.
To the best people ever. So, and he's like, I think he's over 6. He's probably 6'4", 6'5", so he's Mount Everest-ish. Yeah. We also have. So I'm always, as a podcaster, I really started to appreciate coaches and what they do versus just the athletes. And I think jiu-jitsu is fortunate. We have a guy named John Danaher. He was George St. Pierre's grappling coach. Probably the easiest way to tell you who he is. But he has really kind of been sharing a lot of his techniques and strategy and that sort of thing with the jiu-jitsu community. And he's kind of made some pretty good changes as far as, even to my own game, as far as like, the techniques the strategies that I'm implementing and the techniques I'm doing and what I'm trying to do. So he's a big one. As far as coaching goes, he's probably the biggest name in the game right now, and he'd be the Everest.
Okay. Very cool. So in your 20 years of martial arts, is there a philosophy you've learned that rises to the top? One that you keep coming back to that's just really important to you?
Philosophy. So people do these things, do martial arts for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of my listeners was traveling through town, and I don't know how through family ties or he had ties to my old wrestling coach.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, gonna come to your gym and beat me up. Okay, cool. And I walk in, he goes, I have a guest, and he shows me over to the side. I'm like, it's like Coach Kilmer, like retired wrestling coach, and here he is watching us do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the class session. And I, about midway through or whatever, I come over and sit with Coach, and I'm talking with him, and I don't know, like wrestling practice is kind of as close to MMA practice as you're gonna get. Like, it is intense. It is wind sprints. It is nonstop. It is not fun. But that's wrestling practice for high school kids.
Yep.
But I go over to sit next to him, and he's looking, and he's kind of watching what we're doing and technique wise, and he's like, some of you guys are working really hard, and some of them are just here because they want to be here. And hearing that from him was kind of like, that's true. Like, not all the students there want to be, the next champion. Some of them just had a horrible day at work, and they just got to get somewhere where their buddies are, and they want to they know if they get sweaty and they get the endorphins going, they're going to feel better.
Right.
So just kind of, I don't know what kind of a philosophy that is, but we all have different reasons for being there.
Mm-hmm.
And those reasons definitely, they change over the years. And for me, I like whether to go train or not today, like, I know there's a room with 20 or 30 of my friends in it. They're going to be training hard. They're going to be having a good time. They're going to be telling jokes and laughing and choking me, and maybe I'll choke them too. But, and that's my reason now for going, is just because I enjoy the process and I enjoy the people. And I don't know, and looking at like a newer person, maybe they're here because they're scared that they're going to be getting in, someone's going to beat them up. Right. And they're there for a little different reason. But we all have our own stories. We all have our own problems off the mat. But we come there, and it's just, it should be a place where people can grow.
Great answer. All right, we got a few fun ones to wrap it up. So first one, favorite martial arts book.
Martial arts book. Mm-hmm. So I talked to you a little bit before the thing, and we talked about books a little bit. I'm going to have to go with a book that has helped me as a martial artist and as a teammate. It's called The Culture Code. Okay. And you could get it at any library, or it's by a guy named Daniel Coyle. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He basically, and it's not about martial arts, but it is about martial arts, and the fact that it talks about what successful teams do and how they make the teammates feel. And it will help you, like, if your teammate goes out there and they lose, like, how to deal with that, how to help them feel like they're still part of the team, how to help them grow further down the road. It's just about how people always talk about, like, having goals and, hitting the next thing for successful, or I'm working on a certain type of choke. I've been working on it for months and I want to get better at that. But really the main thing is the culture of the place you're training is really important. That will enable everyone to have success. And he outlines, the book is well written, mm-hmm. as far as it tells interesting stories, and it'll hook you. Nice. I've read all of his books. I recommend him, but that one in particular, for any gym owner out there, anybody who's trying to teach a class, I think that's a good one.
Cool. I will add that to my list. All right. Favorite martial arts video game. Were you a gamer at all growing up?
Video game. We had a Nintendo. Nice. I don't even know. I can't think of any. We had the
Street Fighter. We had the
Street Fighter. We had Street Fighter, and I remember, I'd play against my brother, and we'd win half the time, mm-hmm. and then I played against the kid who actually knew how to play the game, and I could not hit that kid. Nice. My guy would just get murdered. I was like, oh, he's good at this. I didn't know you could be good at this. But cool. I don't know if that's that's the game I played.
Okay, that's a good one. All right, favorite martial arts TV show.
TV show.
Any that you watch or used to watch?
No, I don't think I.
Have you checked out Cobra Kai yet at all? Or
no, I haven't seen Cobra Kai. I've to be honest, the only TV show I can remember watching as an adult is The Office. I guess Dwight Schrute is doing some kind of martial art.
That's right. I forgot about that episode. Yeah.
I hate. That's not really. I guess I just, it gives you a warning. Like, don't be Dwight Schrute at work.
There you go.
But I got nothing on that one, man. I'm sure there's some good shows out there.
Okay. And how about a favorite martial arts movie?
Favorite martial arts movie? Man, there's a lot of good martial arts movies.
Yeah.
Like one I think about quite a bit more than I probably should is the Matrix. Remember when they plugged in the back of his head and it like downloaded him Kung Fu or something? He's like, I know Kung Fu now. I feel like over the course of the last 5 years, the quality of instruction for jiu-jitsu have gotten so much better that it's like those kids get to tap that thing in the back of their head and learn jiu-jitsu so much faster. I tell like a lot of the times so we go white belt then blue belt, and it takes about 2 years to get your blue belt. All of the blue belts today are better than I was when I was blue belt.
Really?
At my gym anyway. It's like,
okay.
Like they get to train with 4 or 5 black belts every day. I got to train. I met a black belt when I got my blue belt. Like that's
wow.
The environment is so much different. And I think that it's not like we are doing some different techniques, but like the way that we're teaching and the way that we're sharing knowledge, we're handing over like systems versus single techniques. Like you said, you learned a type of an arm bar in that seminar. Well, if you got proficiency in that arm bar, I'm going to try to show you as many ways to funnel a match to that arm bar position to where you can get to your place you're good at.
Okay.
And back in the day, it was like, here's a move, here's another different move. And there was no linkage as far as getting things to combine together.
Nice.
At least that probably was my fault more than anything, but I think Matrix, as far as getting to plug something in, and I'm sure other martial arts have had a bit of a change as far as like the best instructors hopefully are sharing their knowledge with the community,
right,
and helping to get better. Like I said, like John Danaher, probably the best grappling coach, he's sharing stuff with the community and really teaching behind like not just what he's doing, but why the students do certain things. It's really pretty interesting and helpful.
Cool. So have you seen a good martial arts movie that actually shows good BJJ in it? Is there any out there that you would consider that it's actually realistic and looks good on screen?
So I haven't.
I know there's been some MMA ones. I don't know if there's been any that are specifically BJJ though.
It's so hard because I don't know, maybe you being a person who has done a lot more striking,
mm-hmm.
like when you watch a fight scene, do you constantly think that, they're not actually getting hit? You know what I mean? Like, do you see that happening? Like, I might watch a fight scene and like, this guy's getting drilled, like, a nice jab, cross combo or whatever. You're like, I didn't really hit him. Or why would he? I could identify fake grappling immediately.
Okay.
And it just looks different. Like even, you mentioned Ronda Rousey. She would show these highlight footage of her sparring with, I forget who it was, one of the Gracies. Mm-hmm. She was sparring with him and she was like getting arm bars on something like they're not rolling. They're not sparring. They're making a video, and it was like totally obvious to somebody who's got several years of grappling experience. But so it's just hard, and they have to be more exciting. So much of jiu-jitsu is like a centimeters game, and whether the choke is tight or not, it's really hard to tell. It's just not a good movie. Okay. It's just, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Have you?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I don't know enough about BJJ to know. I mean, like I know like the movie Red Belt. I've been told by a lot of people who do BJJ that that's a really good movie. I actually haven't seen that one yet, but and there's been some MMA ones that have had some BJJ in it, like Here Comes the Boom and stuff like that, and some other ones. But as far as like the stand-up stuff, that's one where I don't necessarily, when I see the fight scenes, I don't necessarily think that they're not hitting them, but I like ones that look realistic. They're like, I'll see one and I'll be like, all right, I know that style enough to know that that's how it would really go down, and that looks cool. And other ones are just too. I mean, I like the ones that are flashy fight scenes, but I also like the ones like, have you seen the Bourne Identity movies? One of my go-tos is in the Bourne Identity movie with Matt Damon. The one scene in the park where he's sleeping on the bench and the two cops come and start telling him he can't sleep there, and he like takes them both out in like 10 seconds. That's one of my most favorite realistic fight scenes in a movie, because it's like I recognized almost every move he did, and I know that could actually be possible. So that's kind of when I view fight scenes. That's what I'm looking at.
Do you really?
That's just me.
Is it him doing it, you think, or is it a stunt person?
That I don't know. I didn't research that enough.
Is Matt Damon doing those things?
Yeah, I'll have to find out. I don't know for sure. I know there's stunt doubles in it, but I also
know like Keanu Reeves is training.
Yes. Yeah. No, Keanu Reeves.
It's almost like it'd be a performance double versus a it'd be like a performance double versus a stunt double, because
True.
like it's not really going to injure Matt Damon, but can he actually physically do the things that his character is doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of martial arts movies, there's guys who have never done it in their lives. It used to be where if it was a martial arts movie, they would hire a martial artist, and nowadays they'll hire actors and they'll train them for 6 months to make it at least look like it's good on screen. So it's
yeah. That's the thing. Do you think that the movie industry has a positive influence nowadays on the martial arts community as far as getting people to be interested in it?
For the most part, yes. But I mean, I look back over, whether it's in my lifetime or guests I've talked to, there's been a few like key moments that really helped the martial arts industry. Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee. That was one of the first big ones, the big martial arts boom. And then you jump ahead about 10, 11 years and it's the Karate Kid. The Karate Kid, there was so much growth in martial arts schools in America after that. Then you jump ahead about 5 or 6 years and it's the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers. And then we haven't really had much other than like the UFC. That wasn't really a movie. That was more, the UFC has had a major impact over the last almost 30 years now because of it. But I don't know if there's been any specific movies since like the, Power Rangers or Ninja Turtles in like 91 that have really impacted it that much. I know like Cobra Kai, I've heard from some people, instructors that have had people come in because of that. And some of the people who are watching Cobra Kai and going back and rewatching the original Karate Kids and stuff like that. So, but I don't think we've had that big of an impact in almost 30 years, which we had that many in like 20 years and then nothing since then. So it's just my opinion.
I think sometimes we see like a negative effect with some of our athletes. Trying to act like MMA fighters as far as like personality wise. Yeah. Because like the average UFC fan is not a martial artist.
Exactly.
And so they can get away with being like rude or disrespectful and showboating and that sort of thing. But the average jiu-jitsu fan that's watching these jiu-jitsu athletes compete, they do jiu-jitsu. And so being rude to your opponent, disrespectful, that just doesn't fly. Some people do it and get away with it, but like, you're disrespecting somebody who has worked just as hard as anybody else. Martial artists don't like to disrespect stuff as well. And I think that some of the competitors want to kind of get that showboat kind of thing going on. And sometimes it works okay, but sometimes it just kind of flies in the face. And it's just like, you can get away with that in MMA because the fans aren't martial artists, but real martial artists appreciate people who respect their opponents, I think, most of the time.
Yeah, and I've seen complete from one end of the spectrum to the other. I've seen supposedly highly respected instructors try to pick fights because they thought their student got screwed out of a point in a tournament or something, and it's like, dude, what are you teaching your students right now? I've actually seen that happen, and I've seen complete opposite. So it's unfortunately, even people who study martial arts for long periods of time, some of them are, if you're a jerk, you're a jerk. Martial arts might not be able to change that, but for the most part, majority of the people I've met throughout my 38 years in martial arts have been good people. And when I started the podcast, the whole thing was I wanted to have a wide variety of guests, not just celebrities, I wanted people that no one's ever heard of. And I actually went back and interviewed my original instructors, my instructor from 1984, my instructor from 1990. Cool. Yeah. So I still kept in contact with them and chatted with them and stuff. And it was fun to do that. And for the most part, they've, with the exception of the one horrible instructor I had in college that I compared to John Kreese from Karate Kid, every other, instructor I've dealt with for the most part, and most people I've met have been really good people.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It helped. I mean, it's important to have. They are influential people in the lives of their students.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you see a bad one, you're like, how can you do that in front of your students? How can you act like I said, the one guy, it was an instructor from Canada who was down here at one of our tournaments, and he thought his student should have won, and she got second, and he just started freaking out and tried picking fights with other judges, and it's like, dude, you need to leave. Seriously. Like, I guarantee that there's a lot more people here that have been doing this longer than you that will step in and back up these people if you try anything, so you might just want to cool off and leave. So,
man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There's only one reason to fight somebody. It's because they're going to fight me.
Exactly. Self-defense.
I don't fight because you hurt my feelings. I don't fight because you were disrespectful. There's so many ways to lose a fight, even if you win. Like, I could go to jail. I can get arrested. I could lose my job. I could get sued.
Yep.
Like, I can win all the actual fights and still lose big. Not to mention everybody has weapons, and I don't. Yeah. Only reason why I'd much rather run away or just Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean,
to pick a fight. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I started martial arts because I got bullied when I was a kid. That was the whole reason. And my whole plan was when I was younger, I was gonna get really good and I was gonna go beat up those people that picked on me. And of course, I never did that. I mean, since I started martial arts, I've been in probably what I would consider 2 fights ever since I started martial arts. And that's, starting back from 1984. So yeah, it's, once you get to the point where you can handle yourself and you don't have to use it, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
If you get in if you get in for the wrong reason, it's fine as long as the reason changes. if you get a good instructor, there's other instructors. If I might have ended up with the wrong instructor, I might have gone up and picked a fight with those guys who picked on me when I was younger. So luckily, I'm sure they were
jerks to you, but I think about everybody who picked on me or was a bully to me. I'm sure they had horrible home lives.
Yeah.
Listening to some of the stuff they would say, not necessarily to me, but they would talk about, it's like, man, those kids go home and get beat up way worse than they're going to beat me up. Or, that's just, as an adult, I kind of feel bad for those kids. But
exactly.
Like at the time, I was scared of them and they were mean and I wanted them to go away. But
that's great.
It's a kid in a tough situation that's taking it out the wrong way. But
yep. Well, Byron, I want to thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I've loved having you on the show. I loved hearing about your journey in martial arts, and I will put links out there for your podcast and anything else you want me to, and hopefully get you some new listeners that way. But it's been such fun and a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, you're great. I like I said, I mean, you're providing a service to the community, and I'm happy to be a small part of that. But I appreciate the variety of arts you've covered, and I'm definitely a fan of the show and listened to several episodes. It's nice to kind of get that broader spectrum of the martial arts world than I have been getting. So I'm added to the list as far as a fan of the show. So you did a great job, man.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.